Yo, it's Dorog here, and today we gotta talk about the death of AGS and what it actually means for Lost Ark. Is this actually going to be a good thing for the game? Is Lost Ark actually saved? Let's take a look and see what they've said. And we'll start here with Smilegate's definitely not AI-generated message announcing the change. There's a lot of PR mumbo-jumbo in this, where Smilegate repeats the same sentiments they've said before about how the game is going to get better, and how Smilegate is definitely going to listen to the global audience. Which personally, I would take this with a large grain of salt. Smilegate hasn't listened to the global population for years. I have no reason to believe that they're going to now. But there are a couple things in here that I would like to note. First, I'd like to highlight this sentence: with the ultimate goal of making it possible for you to play the same content at the same time. That said, we do not intend to close this gap all at once. This sounds great. There's no reason Global Lost Ark should have been this far behind KR for so long. But with that said, this also means that this still wouldn't happen anytime soon. If Smilegate is taking over in early 2027, then I personally wouldn't expect this to be a reality until 2028. This also tells me that since they've stated that Global will still be connecting through Steam, this still seems like there's going to be two separate clients for Lost Ark. Given Smilegate, I'm just having a hard time personally believing that this transition will result in the overall game that some people think that it will, where there's this global market and Global is connected to KR. Because this would be a rather large development ordeal, and I can't say Smilegate is really in full force on development for this game anymore. We barely get content in the game as it stands, but maybe they're putting more development resources into this. I just really personally doubt it, because they're literally saying that Global is going to remain behind KR at least through 2027. And this sentence, of course we don't believe releasing updates at the same time as Korea will solve everything at once. Where I honestly don't think it's going to solve very much at all. I think the only issue it really fixes is the delay in information on updates. I understand the idea that Global can't just be caught up to Korea because the strain it would add on to global players. And I understand there are ideas that would be a positive from having Global caught up, like being able to finally blind prog raids. Which this is great and everything, but the reason I brought up that Global will remain behind KR through at least a majority of 2027 is because the current trend in the global population is that everyone is quitting every day. There won't be a global population by the time it's caught up. Which I've seen some points where Smilegate will earn more per transaction from the global population without AGS, which could incentivize them to give more weight to Global's opinions on issues. Which, that would be true, but if the global population continues to decline, then there's no extra incentive when they earn less from having significantly less people. But that brings me to my actual issue with all of this. People aren't quitting the game because of AGS. People are quitting the game because the game sucks. And it's getting boring and unsatisfying to progress through for a multitude of reasons. The reason that the game sucks is a result of Smilegate's mismanagement and greed. I don't understand how people think that Smilegate taking over publishing for Global Lost Ark is going to change anything in the game itself that's causing people to quit. The reality is right now, by the time Smilegate takes over publishing, the population of Lost Ark will be 99% Korean again, which Smilegate was already self-publishing the game in Korea. So the game just reverts back to where it was before AGS, which is, by all means, a failure in the global market. I think the best case scenario when Smilegate takes over is that nothing changes at all. Because the one thing that AGS did actually try to do was help implement changes into the game that favored gameplay and not just spending money on pay to win. Now we can argue to what degree, because absolutely there is way too much pay to win in the game as it is. But let's take roster bound Astro Gems as an example. Personally, I think the entire Astro Gem system is fucking dumb, but when you consider that in Korea they have tradable Astro Gems where you have to spend fions on them and they aren't open, so you have to gamble the stats on them, it kinda makes me think that Smilegate is milking their customer base way more than people realize. Why are there fions for Astro Gems? Why do fions still exist, by the way? I was told originally they existed to prevent market manipulation, but that never made sense because everything that costs fions already has a trade limit. Maybe because they're just a lazy way to get people to spend more gold, so that the people need more gold, so they spend more money on the shop. But we can expect that when Smilegate takes over, the amount of pay to win in the game will increase by a dramatic amount. And given the current changes in the game that Smilegate has done, it's pretty safe for me to assume that this game will become unplayable without spending money on it regularly. The most two recent core raids are Cathedral and Belgarden. The item level gap between the hardest versions is 30 item levels. The cost of progression is becoming astronomical for people to keep up with, and it just isn't satisfying to try and keep up with anymore. Majority of the content in this game is unchanged, stale, and taxing. 99% of the content in this game is referred to as homework or chores. To me, that should be a clear indication that your game isn't fun. When are chores and homework ever fun? If the game isn't fun, then it's a bad game. That's the whole point of the game. This is why people are quitting. The reality of this entire situation is that AGS isn't responsible for the game's decline. It's Smilegate. Smilegate removed most of the content from the game. Smilegate nerfed your progression. Smilegate limits how much you can play. Smilegate is responsible for these paradise bugs and exploits. Smilegate is responsible for releasing content and the content speed. The issues in the game aren't a result of AGS. The issues in the game are going to continue to exist even after Smilegate takes over. Are there things that Smilegate could do to make the game better? Yeah, absolutely. But it's all band-aid unless they reduce the amount of pay to win in the game and actually let people play the game. Will Smilegate do some get up where they give an extra event for global or something when they first take over? Probably. I'm sure Smilegate will do something when they first take over and it will appear to be some beneficial thing for global. But ultimately, the game will fall right back into the same core issues that continue to exist and continue to cause people to quit. And I hate this argument of the game was never going to maintain 1 million people. Yeah, that's dumb because the game can't even maintain its current core audience considering the game's lost 30% of its population this year alone. It doesn't make sense to say the game wasn't going to retain its population and to say that this game is a niche game and will have a niche audience, while said niche audience is quitting on a daily basis and no one can get into the game to experience it. There's a difference between niche and shit, and right now the game is shit. And it has been, and Smilegate has been serving it to us saying it's the best piece of chocolate. But like every time before, I'm smelling it thinking, this certainly stinks. Oh, but it's a Korean MMO, so it's going to be pay to win, right? This is so dumb to me. I don't understand how pay to win has ethnic ties. Well, I do. It's because companies like Nexon, NCSoft, and Smilegate have indoctrinated an entire culture into pay to win being normal. Because these companies don't care about their games, MMOs are just pumping up scams to these executives. So they just want to profit the most they can off as little effort. And when the game starts to die, they just release another one. Which is sad because Lost Ark would have been massively successful in the global market by not being pay to win. Which means the game would have easily retained hundreds of thousands of players instead of just thousands. Because a lot of people playing the game still don't seem to realize how much pay to win even affects them. Even if you don't spend money on the game, you are still very impacted by pay to win existing. All of these annoyances with ArtGrid exist to add longevity to a system that exceeds their plan for it to be relevant. But they prey on people that don't care how long it's supposed to take. They prey on the people that want to get it done first. That's why there were Astrogem packs being sold the day Kazaros was being released. But the added longevity has side effects to everyone else that doesn't want to buy those packs. All of your progression is significantly more difficult because they sell packs with materials in them. They wouldn't make much money off of the packs if you could more easily obtain the materials in-game. So they limit what you can get and then adjust it in disproportionate ways so people don't see the added strain. It doesn't make sense that the gem increase from a level 3 to a level 4 cube is bigger than the gem increase from a level 4 cube to level 1 halls. Well, it does when you consider the added obscurity that Smilegate is implementing to slow down the overall gem supply. Because while the base increase is proportionate, you're nerfed on lucky rooms and mega lucky rooms by half, and the chance of getting them is even lower. The 6-character gold limit doesn't even make sense. This argument that if you can farm an infinite amount, it adds inflation to the market is completely nulled by the fact that you can buy gold. What adds inflation to the market is the fact that you can buy gold from the shop and it just spawns in from nowhere. When people sell items on the market at inflated prices, they aren't selling to the average player. These are items being sold at inflated prices to take advantage of the whales that have spent tons of money on the game. When I found a grudge book at the beginning of tier 4, I wasn't thinking I should read this because 400k makes sense for the cost of this book. I sold it at 400k because some whale who spent way too much money on the game is sitting on a crazy excess and can afford it. The reality is that when most people see how much I raid between my two accounts, they're thinking that there's no way that they would bother doing that. It just is too much raiding for them. So this idea that without the limit everyone is suddenly able to farm an infinite amount of gold is just stupid. The reality is that a small amount of people will just spend money on an infinite amount of gold instead, and those people will always be the target market. But by limiting more people with how much they can farm, it entices more people into spending money as well. Which is frustrating to me when I realize that there are way too many people that are buying gold in a video game that are doing it on credit. There are people out there spending money on Lost Ark that simply do not have the money to do so. And obviously they aren't making good financial decisions doing that, but Smilegate lives off people that don't make smart financial decisions. Smilegate has probably spent more money on researching the best ways to exploit these people through microtransactions than they've spent on the entire development of Lost Ark. Nearly every annoyance and inconvenience in this game has a solution to it in the cash shop. Imagine a game where you just had access to remote storage and repair, and you didn't run out of mana every 5 seconds, and Fions didn't exist, and you were able to attain materials at a rate that matched the content progression. Imagine being able to actually come close to maxing out a character without spending thousands of dollars or an entire year per system. Imagine having periods of actual soft resets so new players can enter the game without the risk of devaluing the veterans' investments. That seems like a way better game to me. These are things that could have just been designed into the game from the beginning, but instead they were looked at as a sellable feature. And before anyone tries to tell me, well, the game has to make money, it's a live service game, there are way better monetization methods. If anything, the subscription model is working way better for WoW and Final Fantasy XIV, and skins can be sold in the shop as untradeable items, which is doing really well for Path of Exile. But the game has to change in a largely dramatic way to have any chance of getting people back into it. If Loa on Winter comes and they announce a tier 5, but Art Grid still exists in the game, then the game is effectively dead. Aside from the issues with just Art Grid, if it's not removed, then it shows the mentality of them wanting to keep returning people and new people significantly behind. For most people, even if tier 5 comes out, if they tried to return to the game, there's too many systems they go through. There's too much progression to get through. There's an overwhelming amount of information to learn with very little resources to learn it. And that most people just don't want to do that. They know that they can't catch up with all of these hurdles, and if you're still forced to go through all of them, it really kills your excitement to get back into the game. Because chances are, it's a new piece of content that they're releasing that's causing people to return. But if they can't play the new content when they return in a reasonable amount of time, then there's no point to them playing. Honestly, the game needs an actual reset to even have a chance of getting people back into it. But this has been the same song and dance for 5 years now, and really all they've done is remove the content that you could easily get back into, like PvP or Hell modes. Which is unfortunate really, because the main reason I even started playing the game was because competitive PvP in this game wasn't pay to win. I think that anything considered competitive in a pay to win space is an absolute joke, and there's no real competitive nature to this game's rating. But I ultimately didn't care about the PvE that much when the game came out, so I didn't care about the pay to win. But since PvP is literally non-existent in the game now, it's pretty frustrating that the only part of the game that's left is this. Dailies haven't changed at all. They can't even come out with a new Guardian anymore. You get one new Guardian a year, and then you're forced to rotate between all the shit ones you already hated. Smilegate's development cycle and the game's progression cycle always result in doing the same content for at least a year before it becomes irrelevant. And I'm going to quote irrelevant here because new players will still be forced to endure that for the same amount of time long after it's irrelevant. And as I said in the past, there is no raid in any game that is so good that you can run it 6 times a week for an entire year and not get sick of it. And it just doesn't make sense to me that it takes Smilegate 4 to 6 months to come up with a new raid that only has 2 fights, or sometimes even only 1 fight like the extreme raids. It doesn't make sense to me that Smilegate has supposedly been working on new horizontal and contents for a while leading up to Loa on Winter 2025. But there wasn't even a preview of what they'd done in Loa on 2026. What have they been doing for the past 6 months? And really, the carrot on a stick items need to be limited. There's no reason level 10 gems needed to be accessible at the beginning of tier 4. Content progression should make sense for the content that's out. It very drastically changes development when you have to try and design a new fight where people are able to get 30 item levels over the intended design before the fight even comes out. Not to mention how frustrating these items are for people that want to earn them in-game. When people realize these items were never meant for them to have, it's often after they've already spent time on it, which then results in a bunch of wasted time for them. And that's frustrating for people. So we're just left in this dead zone again, hoping the next Loa on will actually present something good for the game. But this is a bit more than a fool me twice at this point. I've been fooled far too many times to think that somehow the core game is going to change because Smilegate is taking over. And ultimately, this is the direction Smilegate wants the game to go. And given all of the other game releases that are coming out in 2027 during this, I'm going to say I'm far more excited for Guild Wars 3 right now than anything Lost Ark has to offer for the next year. And Smilegate taking over is probably the nail in the coffin for me. But you guys let me know down in the comments what you think. Do you think Smilegate taking over will actually do anything for the game? Do you think Smilegate will ever give people a chance to get back into the game? Have you still not subscribed to my channel? Until the next one, dudes. Peace!